Hello, and welcome to this lecture on language and cognition. We are going to speak about the relationship between language and cognition in development. And we'll speak about some basic language and cognitive milestones, and we'll see how they interlace together. Cognition is defined as a set of mental activities that are involved in the comprehension of perceived information, including acquisition, like acquiring new knowledge, organization, organizing that kind of knowledge, the learning that you acquire, memory, storage of that memory, and use of the knowledge. So all these sets of memories, little bits and pieces of memories that you capture throughout life from your experiences, all of that makes your knowledge. Now, before we delve in and speak about details, what do you think about the relationship between language and thought, language and cognition? Does language come first? Does cognition come first? Does cognition serve language? Does language serve cognition? So, of course, philosophers in the past debated and spoke about all these issues and so on. So, in a nutshell, cognition comes before language. And you are going to see that animals are able to, to have ideas, like ravens, monkeys. They all have, they can think, they plan. Even ants, they have plans that they go about and have goals and so on. They can perceive danger. So there is cognition in animals that obviously do not have human language. When you think about language, communication, but particularly linguistic communication, verbal writing, and so on, this is only a vehicle, a tool, a way to put your ideas and your thoughts and your emotions in so you can share them with someone else. Once you say language, it means the purpose is to externalize these thoughts, these emotions, these needs, desires, and so on that you have here. And you use language so you can articulate these needs and express them to others. So knowing that, now we know that language is secondary to cognition. Language serves cognition. There is the early period of childhood. Language and cognition are like this, whereby cognition requires stimulation to develop, and they require to build knowledge. And this knowledge, in order to acquire it, comes to you, it's coming to you from outside in the form of language that other people use, because they express in that language their emotions, their feelings, their whatever it is that they want to share with you. And that gives you the experience, that gives you the knowledge. Like someone writes a book, how do they convey it to you? In the textbook, say, writing sentences, or, if it's a lecture and so on. So that aspect of acquiring, that knowledge and internalizing it, it requires language. It requires a linguistic modality so that you can take in the information. So in this sense, language serves as a tool to develop cognition. And in the early, childhood years, again, you will find that cognitive development is going this way, linguistic development is going this way. both of them progress based on, the certain levels, and they are parallel. And to some degree, the cognitive abilities have to emerge slightly before or maybe at the same time as language abilities. For example, for a child to be able to learn how to make to transition from a single word to, kind of 2 to 3 words, to make a basic structure that is similar to a sentence, that is missing some pieces, like mommy store. That is a child's question of, is mommy at the store? Did mommy go to the store? And it serves as a combination of words that are like prototype of a sentence. The child will not be able to do that until the long-term memory tracks start to connect into lower areas, deeper areas, to make more extensive connections, so that you can support long-term storage of information on a conscious level. So as we keep going, you are going to see that how these cognitive milestones will interlace with language milestones. When you speak about cognition, basically the acquisition of new knowledge and the use of that knowledge to express and externalize to your ideas in methods and particular ways. Recognizing something, it means that you have seen it before, that you have experienced it at least once before. So let's say you see an image of something, you have seen it once, it registered, it got stored. And then you see it again at any given point after that, and then you are going to match what you have seen, kind of display it against what you already know. And when you have matched them, oh, I have this already, I know this already, you recognize. So that is one of the simplest and most basic forms of cognition. For example, how do we do this in terms of academics? When you test someone, give them a quiz or test, multiple choice, true, false. These are recognition, because you show them what you want them to identify. They have it as one of these choices, and then they say, oh, I recognize this because it is here. Match it. Yes, I know this. And I give you the answer. Then another skill that is among the early skills, or the skills that are involved in cognition, are cognitive organization. Cognitive organization, basically organizing thoughts and ideas in a cohesive manner and in a coherent manner. What's the difference? Cohesion, coherence. Cohesion is on the paragraph level. When you write a paragraph, they ask you to write a topic sentence. You summarize basically the content of the upcoming paragraph. And then you give us details, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. All these details serve the topic sentence. They are all connected. Go back and point back to the topic sentence. And then you recap at the end of the paragraph. That recap goes to each detail, or wraps them up, and reflects back to, or goes back to the topic sentence again. So that is on the level of the paragraph. You speak about cohesion, and there are ties, there are cohesive ties that are used to kind of connect words, have them point forward, words that point backwards, and so you get like a mesh when you do a cohesion analysis of a paragraph. You find it like a really interconnected, whereby if you take one single sentence, drag it out, it will have a chain of elements in the paragraph until the entire paragraph, comes in together as, linked. Coherence, it has to do with the connection among paragraphs. So you make a story, you make a textbook, you make a book, you make a chapter. All the elements of that have to be flow into each other in a systematic manner, in a logically sequenced manner, in a way that would make that, coherent, like a nice start, introduction, and then details of the topic, and then you conclude at the end. So organizing or organization of ideas, that is one basic part, one basic feature very critical for cognition and for facilitating the acquisition of new skills in language and other things. If you give someone a whole, dump a lot of information on them in a way that is not organized and categorized and classified into groups and into sets of things, they will have a tough time. They will spend longer to process it, to sort it out, and to take it in. But if you give them something that is organized and sequenced, you are going to decrease the burden on their cognitive abilities. So that way, when we make recommendations, for example, to reduce cognitive overload, we ask that you provide the information in a systematic way, in an organized way, so that you enable the brain to free a lot of the skills, attention and memory, that when they are freed up, they can do their normal function. And if you do not do that, and you do not organize what you present, or what you teach someone else, then that is going to consume most of their cognitive skills in terms of memory and attention and self-monitoring, and they will spend a lot more time on the task otherwise, and they might not process the whole thing depending on the time that you give them. So in that sense, because the brain is organized by nature, it looks for categories, it looks for patterns all the time. That is a basic principle of how the brain learns. So organization by nature facilitates storage of the information, retrieval of the information that you acquire, and it facilitates the fast intake, the fast encoding of that information. Organizing information prevents an information overload, because it will require less cognitive energy, it will require less attention, and it will require less memory capacity. It will make it possible to learn an infinite amount of information when you organize it, neatly and so on. It doesn't take as much, again, to store different bits and pieces. You make it easier for the brain. So in order first to acquire a skill, like say language skills, you have to encode. Encoding is taking in new information. And you take that new information in, hold it in the working memory, hold it in the particularly short-term memory, and then pay attention to it and analyze and so on. And then you start to take it apart, analyze it, and then put it back together in different ways. That is synthesizing new ideas out of what you have, assembling it again. So storing new concepts, the first steps of taking in or encoding of information comes by in that form of sustaining information in the working memory. And then you begin to break it down and analyze it. And then you form, once you have internalized it, taken it to the storage site, then you form a schema or a scheme. That is the first concept as it goes into the brain. It serves as the prototype of a particular, for example, concept that you have. Concepts, they have a core concept, and then you put it there and it starts to grow and to develop as you keep going. And this is why we say language acquisition and development. You take a concept and you expand on that concept and make it richer and more comprehensive as you go. For example, when a child learns, let's say, about a horse, so seeing a horse for the first time, the horse must, happens to be a black horse. So the child recognizes this, thinking it has to be a black horse to qualify to be called a horse. And the child will stay like this for a week or two, early in development. And then the concept is going to develop more, is going to grow. So that concept of seeing the black horse and forming a concept of it, a basic raw concept as a schema or scheme. Then as the child sees more horses, oh, white, and then he calls it something else, and then so, oh no, this is also a horse, and the brown horse, and then now he's expanding the concept, that schema. But if he didn't have that scheme, if he doesn't build that schema in the first place, he is not going to develop, the other concepts. So basically, you start developing a schema that can be an auditory, like one word that you hear for the first time, and for example, an image that you see for the first time. And then as you see it more, as you experience it more and learn more about it, then that schema serves as the seed out of which, that's going to grow and grow into a set of concepts, and it will be connecting with your knowledge in knowledge system generally. So in order to form an auditory scheme, say an image of a sound, an image of a word, something that a word that you hear, the child has to hear the word thousands of times. So in order to hear, to form, schemes, semantic schemes like words, for example, that you use, there is a period of time when the children are very fast picking up. They might need one exposure or two at some stage in their lives. But these schemes or schemas are essential to build concepts. Phonological memories, what you hear and remember through your phonological system, they are connected with semantic memories. Semantics has to do with the meaning of the word, or the meaning within a sentence. The boundaries of semantics is within a sentence. So each word has a meaning, that's semantics. And when you put all the words in one sentence, they have a meaning that is greater than the meaning of individual words combined in the sentence. So because, the reason that we string different words in a sentence is that putting them together, they give you something that, individual words cannot give. They give you a context, for each word. So each word is going to come alive in that particular sentence. So again, the meaning of a sentence is, as a whole, is greater than the meaning of individual words that are combined in the sentence. So the effect of it is going to give you a greater context that where every word comes alive. When you put, for example, you look at words, hear them, that is gonna activate semantic memories. When you hear a word like, say, cat, you are going to activate the concept of cat. What is it? It is an animal, it's a feline, it does this and this, looks like this and that. So that meaning is the semantics. The phonological memory of it is when you hear the word cat, the words going, sounds going, and you recognize the concept and say, oh, so phonemes or sounds activate semantic or the meaning of the word. The same also happens when you say it's an animal, that's a feline, it is small, it looks like this and that. Now immediately the word cat is going to ring in my mind. So semantics can activate the sounds of the word, or the sounds, phonological patterns of the word is going to activate the semantic concept of the word. They are connected. A phonological scheme, in order to form, like say, to actually be able to make an impression in memory, just one exposure, say cat, you hear it once. To form that so that you can recognize it, it will become a solid scheme or schema, you require numerous exposures to the sound, like hundreds of times, until you kind of get it and confidently you can own it. However, for the meaning component, for semantics, to understand the meaning and store the meaning, build a schema based on the meaning, like a horse, you see it for the first time, say horse. And you see a book for the first time, a book. That meaning part, it takes just a couple of exposures, and in some cases at a period of time in the child's age, like between 3 and 5, a single exposure. You go around, say look at this, say book, and or someone says, oh book, and then there's oh book, and then they form a schema of that, and then they keep moving, and then day by day they acquire more things that have to do with book and develop the concept. You can read it, you can flip the pages, you can do this. It can come in small sizes, it can come in plastic, it can come in electronically, and all these different concepts of book are going to be built on the semantic schema of the concept itself. Why don't we remember much of what happened before we were 2 years of age? I have asked over the years my students, what is your earliest memory? Some of them say 3, many of them say 3, and of course there's a range, but on average it's around 2 years of age that working memory tracks connect, go from basically the layers of the cortex. The tracks are going to connect all the different layers and connect in between, and then they reach down to connect with other levels so that the information can be channeled and can be stored. You need long-term tracks to sustain knowledge over time, to make it long-term memories. So on average, long-term memory networks begin or are stable and can sustain information at that time because they are connected from top to bottom and sideways. They are connected around age 2 years. And so you can see here, for example, when you look at how these are the layers of the cortex, and there are neurons as you go that span from the very, very third. So here's 1 layer, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. Each one is named after what kind of cell, nerve cell lives in it. So you can see these tracks that go down all the way down, and they get information from all across, like across what do you call it, cerebral cortex. And then they connect going down, and they connect with each other on a lower level and different paths and tracks and so on. So early in childhood, you don't have any of that stuff. You just have some things budding on the surface, and most of this stuff you have a few basic tracks like motor and basic tracks, but a lot of this rich, a fabric kind of is not there. So by age 2, you have a structure that looks, kind of substantially connected, similar to some extent to this. When we say memory tracks, we, of course, initially the center of memory processing, not storage, memory processing, the hippocampus that we discussed before, is on top of your ears in the temporal cortex, here and here. So, looking at the cognitive foundations of language, about 4 months of age, the baby begins to progress from signal to symbol. What does that mean, signal to symbol? So, for example, the bottle is a signal. The baby sees a bottle and is going to, oh, the bottle symbolizes nutrition, symbolizes feeding. So when even if the bottle is empty, the baby is going to associate it with food. So this is the first kind of step toward learning language, some kind of, in a that goes beyond the concrete way. The concrete things they acquire before that. So, for example, a baby who's 3 months old or 2 months old and is taking a bath, and every day the baby goes in the tub and plays with rubber ducky and this and that, and then so at that time, of course, the baby hears words and the baby can recognize different things, but to go beyond the physical thing and see it as a symbol for something else, that is a critical milestone, because it gives you the beginnings of developing kind of abstract concepts that do not exist necessarily here and now. So when the baby sees, there's no food around, the baby sees a bottle and the baby is going to think food, even though there's no food in that. So that takes you to a higher level, from signal to symbol. By 8 months, the baby achieves a major milestone. You have known, of course, about it, studied it in psychology. It is object permanence. Basically, the idea that if something disappears or something is hidden, that I do not see it now, it doesn't mean that it is gone for good. Babies cry a lot. Say 5 months old, 6 months old, when they see, say, mommy or daddy leave, they are heartbroken. One of the reasons is that they do not have the memory to hold their image and say, or to recall that if they aren't here now, that they exist in the world, but they're somewhere else, maybe next door, maybe in the kitchen a few steps away. What gives them that ability to recognize is having object permanence, having enough memory to be able to think and imagine something that doesn't exist in front of their eyes, that doesn't exist right here. So you have something that you are using to play with them, and then you hide it behind your back. So if the child goes like this or like this, trying to find out, that means they have object permanence. That means they know, even though they can't see it, it is hidden, and they can see it in their mind, in their memory, that it is, they imagine you and imagine it behind your back and you are holding it. So that's a major milestone that's going to enable them now to take abstractness to a higher level. They can think now. If the mother walks to the kitchen, they see in their mind, in their memory, the image. They can imagine her somewhere else outside of the here and now context. And that, of course, lays a solid foundation for semantic development. A lot of semantics is, a lot of it is not articulated directly in the word itself. It is between the lines, as they say. So you have a sentence, for example, that is totally not a single word in the sentence tells you the meaning that is intended by the whole sentence. And when I say, put yourself in my shoes, what do you mean? Put yourself in my shoes. Not a single word says, take my perspective. Be like, but the whole expression by itself as an idiom gives you that. So it takes you, that's a kind of semantics, like inferential, like idiomatic expressions. They take you to a higher level of thought, where you can kind of move from signals, from concreteness to abstractness. So that's big, is kind of the beginnings of that is begins at about 8 months. When we say 8 months, some kids can get it at 7, some maybe 6.5, but there will be some that might get it at 9. Some might even go up to 11 months. So, but when we speak about average, that is universally all around the world on average. This is what you would expect. From 9 to 12 months, children understand, and they are basically quite aware of the concept of causality. Understanding that something causes something else. And this has huge implications for behavior and for cognitive development. So, when you have, certain toys, for example, and they have buttons, and they have things that pop up. When you push a button, something pops up. That is a way, that is the purpose of these games, toys, is to develop causality. The relationship. Or that thing pops up because I pushed the button. The dog got scared because it heard the wolf. He heard the wolf. The glass got broken because blah, blah, blah. So that is going to enable someone to achieve, to be able, for example, to solve problems. Because in order to solve a problem, what is the cause? What caused it? It enables you to understand behavior. Someone does something. You say, oh, what made them do that? So these are, you can imagine them as big foundations on which cognition and language are established. If someone doesn't have these cognitive foundations, they wouldn't be able to develop intelligence. They wouldn't be able to develop language. So causality facilitates the acquisition of verbs and semantic relationships. Semantic relationships, for example, they include, it's a whole category. For example, when you say, in terms of verbs, usually someone does something. So there's a relationship between something happening and, things don't happen just on their own. Someone must have caused them to happen. And then you can, keep thinking. In terms of semantic relationships, for example, how are words related to each other? It comes in different levels, but you, for example, will find that a sentence like, she ate a sandwich because she was hungry. So one idea, one behavior is caused by another behavior. That's a kind of a semantic relationship to explain the cause. There is coordination, like I did something and consequently something else happened. One thing caused or gave trigger to something else as a result. There is conditionality. If you do this, this will happen. So there are different levels of causality that basically where the intersection is between language and semantics and cognition. Semantics is so much seeped into cognition and is so much part of cognition. Attention, as you notice, sometimes we keep, trace from birth to a certain age and then go back. So we take it skill by skill, milestone by milestone, and we trace it along the continuum of development. So looking at attention, at birth, baby's attention you are speaking about seconds. Yes, you can make eye contact with a baby right as soon as they are born. You can make eye contact. They are ready to be stimulated with, have sensory stimulation, visual and their skin and their the senses like hearing and so on. So attention itself is very, very limited initially. And it is determined by what stimuli are there, the nature of the stimuli. For example, if something is moving, something is, like a flash of light flashing, the baby is going to attend to it, but it is very, very short. So we are speaking about the period of time in the first 6 weeks or so. If there's an intense light, the baby is going to be startled. And especially at the beginning, the light reflex is very strong initially. The baby's attention, once they hold attention at some point, they are fixated, like they would have difficulty breaking away from something that they fixate on. So, but the ability to select a particular thing in the environment and pay attention to, like, search and lock and onto something and focus attention on, that emerges about 8 weeks after birth. And again, the attention span is quite limited. We are speaking about some seconds. Then the child begins to exhibit signs of habituation to things that are repeated. For example, if you say something, hi, and the child is gonna kind of be looking and will be startled, would pay attention. But you do this frequently, hi, and then you don't see that reaction again. It doesn't arouse that intense focus initially, because habituation means getting used to things. Around 6 to 7 months, the baby's reflexes begin to basically decrease, and they eventually disappear. Reflexes are controlled primarily by the brainstem and by the spinal cord. Reflexes are responses that are involuntary and they are quick. Like, if you see a baby and you go like this in front of the baby, the baby is going to blink. If you stroke the baby's foot, like the sole of their foot, they fan out their toes. Another kind of reflex is called the rooting reflex. If you stroke anything on the side like this, the corner of the mouth, the baby turns around trying to put it in his or her mouth. That's called the rooting reflex. If you put something in the baby's mouth, like say your finger, for example, they are gonna bite on it. That's the biting reflex. All of these reflexes are involuntary until age 6 months or so, and many of these reflexes begin to diminish and to disappear after around 6 to 7 months. And this means that the prefrontal cortex has developed connections, more connections with the motor system, so that you are going to transition from reflexive, involuntary behavior to voluntary behavior. So that part is concerned with voluntary function, voluntary behavior. And the fact that you start to transition from reflexive, non-voluntary behavior to voluntary, it means you have now the wires from the prefrontal cortex now connecting to other areas of the motor system. So that tells you what the behavior that you see. It gives you an indication about what is happening in terms of the anatomy that you do not see. And a lot, like for example, like I said, when we speak about memories and stuff and the development, that can tell you how these tracks are connecting and so on. By age 2 years, the child is able to demonstrate intelligence. That means, these are ways that the child demonstrates. Number one, the child shows that he or she possesses symbolic thought. They can understand, for example, that you can go like this, and pretend that you are a person. That is symbolic thought. And they use that to do symbolic play. And they pretend they are like a firefighter, a doctor, this, that. They are able to problem solve physical problems. And this actually begins even earlier than 2, but you are solidly expected to have it at that time and to use it creatively. So even if you notice a child who's maybe 10 months old, and then they see something over there on a table or something, they are gonna stand and go around, around. If there's a chair or something in front of them, they are going to either go beneath it or go around it. That is all problem solving, physical problem solving. When the child grows bigger, the child could, bring a chair, drag it, and put it there, and climb up to reach something. That is problem solving. You have a goal, and you want to make the goal, put some things to achieve the goal, or remove obstacles. So these are all signs of intelligence. Action-oriented cognitive schemes, these are also when you kind of have a plan, you see a cookie jar on the counter, and I want to get that. So you go and you can't reach. You might hold someone's hand and go drag them and just go and maybe point or say something. So this, again, that is where you have you make a plan and you understand the sequence of actions that you do are going to result in achievement of your goal. A child who is 8 months of age is able to understand someone else's goal, to predict what someone else is going to do. So, for example, the baby is sitting and sees dad going to the closet, getting a coat, and immediately the baby starts crying. Why? Because the baby knows that dad is leaving. And they understand that they make the connection, so they can predict his goal, that he is going away, going out. 9 months of age, the baby is able to establish a goal for himself or herself, to select a means to achieve that goal, as I explained, like seeing, a cookie jar on the counter and dragging a chair, standing on it, and then going up, or trying to go up. Of course, a 9 months old cannot do that, but there are 9 or 10 months olds who can go around and try at least or make, point and try to get someone's attention so that they can achieve their goal. At that time, because the baby has object permanence, the baby is able to anticipate events that are not here and that are not now. The baby is going to think maybe, at a certain time, mom is outside, went to the store or is at work, and the baby comes at a certain time and says, "Mommy, mommy," and he would be expecting her to be coming, for example, at a certain time. The understanding of cause and effect enables the baby to now solve problems, because cause and effect, when you have a problem, you say, why is this happening? What is causing it to happen? So you ask that question, and then you try to reverse the sequence so that if you remove the cause, then the thing that you do not want doesn't happen, or that the thing that you want, if you put the cause in place, then you get the desired thing that you would like. So the cause and effect is a major function, cognitive function, that enables us to understand how to interact, how to analyze behavior, and how to problem solve. And it is very, very much of a tremendous foundation for cognitive and for language development. So again, that cause and effect enables the person to store objects in the brain, and because objects, for example, especially if they are related to that cause and effect, that enables them to associate nouns with verbs. Symbolic play, pretend play also is called pretend play sometimes. Imaginary play. It is robust and it is strong around ages 18 months. And one of the reasons, again, is that time between 18 months, 2 years of age, you have memory, long-term memory building up and becoming substantial by age 2 years. So there's a lot of vocabulary. The child at that time, 18 months, begins to combine 2 words and 3 words to make a proto kind of sentence. So the child is able to use objects to represent something real, something in a real situation or a real a scenario, like pretending that she's in a kitchen having breakfast with her friends and so on, or pretending that a person is a finger stands for is a person talking. There is a direct correlation between symbolic play and language development. There's a lot of language generally that goes into play. Play itself, the context of play, it is essential for children to develop in a context where they have access to play over and over, and to make it part of their daily routine. And there's a lot of research to show that play is wired into our DNA and particularly critical for childhood development. Not just humans, but animals in general. If you watch nature shows and you see animals interacting with their little pups and with their parents, they are always playing. Play lowers your stress hormones, and it puts you in an ideal situation where you feel motivated, you feel happy, and you are practicing real, serious life experiences in a safe environment that is pleasurable, where you can make mistakes and you joke about them, and kind of. So that is critical for the development of real life skills. Symbolic play is impaired in individuals with autism spectrum disorder, and as part of the intervention, when you develop it, it should give rise, to other skills that that depend on symbolic play to develop. And play therapy is it's a known field now. Theory of mind, it means that you are able to take someone's perspective. Just in one sentence or one phrase, theory of mind equals social perspective taking, and we touched upon it previously. So it means, number one, knowing and keeping in mind that other people have thoughts and feelings and emotions and desires and likes and dislikes and so on, that just like you have your own thoughts and ideas, other people are also the same, and that their ideas and their feelings and emotions, blah blah blah, are as important for them as your own emotions and ideas and so on are important to you. It's a kind of gives you that equality. You are a human being, I am a human being, you have feelings, I have feelings, you have beliefs and emotions and so on. So both of us have these things. And that what you have is important to you as much as what I have is important to me. The second component of this is the realization that you do not have to have the same ideas and feelings and beliefs like that I do. That you are entitled to having different feelings, different opinions and so on. And they do not have to be identical to mine. And based on that, you would, build a theory about what the person knows, what they think about, what they believe in, and so on. And based on that, you build that theory and you use it to regulate your communication and your social relationship with that person. And the better understanding you have of the person's theory, of the person's mind and thought and culture and beliefs and so on, the better knowledge you have about this, the better and more and more positive that the relationship you have with that person. So theory of mind enables you to take someone else's perspective to kind of see them as human beings just like you are, and equal, and even though what they know or what they feel doesn't make sense to you, well, that is their reality, and you do not. It doesn't have to be like your reality. For example, might be something heavy, like something like this, a water bottle, and the baby finds it heavy and struggles, and for example, and can't carry. Well, or they might say, oh, it is hard, I can't do it. And then you see it, oh, it is so easy. Saying that, it shows that you do not understand them, that you do not have theory of mind about them. Someone who is an adult, and she sees a little spider crawling, and she just goes, oh my gosh, she becomes scared and goes wild. Someone else sitting there says, why is she acting crazy like that? That person doesn't have theory of mind. I mean, it doesn't have a well-developed theory of mind. Why? Because, yes, you might not be afraid or scared of spiders yourself, but that fear that the other person has is real to that person. This is how they think. This is how they feel things. They feel them differently than you are feeling them, or than you can relate to them. And it doesn't mean that they are necessarily. So your basic idea is using that understanding so that you can connect better with people, and you can, on an equal basis, and you can respect them, and you can work with them and help them if you know their thoughts and feelings and background and all of this. And individuals with autism also have a decreased theory of mind. It isn't something that you either have or do not have. It is something that you build on a continuum. And by age 4 years, the children achieve quite a milestone in that, and they are very, to kind of on a smaller level, like how adults have it. But it begins like, say, 12 months, maybe even, it wouldn't be uncommon if you have a child, you are reading a book or looking, and the child wants you to do something, and it keeps calling you, and you're going like this, looking at your cell phone or book, and they are going to take it away from your hand and until you look at them, and then you can. So that means the baby understands that here in your mind you are distracted. The baby finds the reason, why aren't you paying attention to me? Because you are being focused on something, and and your mind is not with me. So they do problem solving, and they repair the communication breakdown that is caused by your distraction. By the way, the new term for when you are speaking with someone, and they just, as you are speaking with them, they just take their cell phone and start to be busy with it. This is called phubbing, P-H-U-B, and then B-I-N-G. That's a new term that I learned just about 10 days ago, phubbing. So, theory of mind is an automatic inferential process that we constantly engage in as we interact with people. We look at their facial expressions. I say something, say cheese, and the person's face, I know they don't like that. They don't like cheese. Or they verbally saying, I really don't eat cheese. And then you just something else. And so you keep everything they do, all the expression, the response that they give you as you are communicating. You build bits and pieces and construct a theory. You construct an idea about what they think, what they feel, how they have. So it is inferential. You infer based on what the person does or says, or how they react, with their affect. So having a well-developed theory of mind enables us, number one, to infer people's intentions, and also their emotions and desires and knowledge. We will be able to understand that. We'll be able to predict their behavior as well, especially in relationship to what we will say. That person who is afraid of spiders, if I just get a plastic piece of something that looks like anything like a spider and just throw it somewhere, or that I know I can predict the action. I have, when I teach respiration in my anatomy class, I have a balloon, a whole bunch of balloons. I take one and just start blowing, and then I look at some, and I go closer a little bit to the students, and say some of them are like starting to kind of be afraid that it will pop. So I can predict their behavior, based on how they react physically or using words. Okay. So theory of mind has foundations. First, in order to understand others, you have to understand yourself first. And when the first step that comes in understanding yourself is looking in the mirror and identifying the person looking in that mirror back at you as you. And the baby recognizes that by about ages 5 to 6 months. The baby can look in the mirror and know that who is looking at him or her is themselves. So around 18 months, they recognize now their own thoughts. They see themselves as thinking beings. And they recognize their own feelings. I'm not happy, I'm sad, and so on. At around 24 months, they are able to express their own emotional states verbally and, saying, I'm angry, I'm sad, and they also are able to engage in pretend play. By age 4 years, they have developed a significant milestone. Their theory of mind is almost like the adults. And that process continues, of course, to grow through for several years, until maybe 9 or so. Theory of mind facilitates reciprocity of language. And language has to do with give and take, back and forth, exchange, give and take, and mutual respect and politeness and all of this. So it's based on that. And your ability to understand the other side and how the other side thinks and believes and so on is going to enable you to regulate your language, your communication, what words you choose, how you express, so that you can match, in the best way that you can, the needs of your communication partner in terms of to be able to establish a positive communication with them. To develop theory of mind, obviously, theory of mind is not a theory that you want to prove. It's just a set of assumptions that you make about the person based on how they talk, how they show their emotions, and so on. It requires social experience. It requires social interactions so that you can, the more you interact with people, the better you understand their minds, the better you are able to take their perspective. One of the big reasons that people who discriminate are not able to overcome that, or they engage in that discrimination. I'm saying, they should be able to overcome that. But one of the reasons that makes them not do that is lack of knowledge. They do not have social interactions with people from other cultures. And once you do that, you break the barrier, they begin to develop theory of mind about these people. They know their struggles. They know that they have hopes, they have dreams, they have families they go back to at night. And they, like anyone's family, they have kids that go to school, and they have a life like everyone else. So once you get that kind of social experience with these people, then also you will be able to take their perspective, and you likely, when you see them as just like yourself, would be very unlikely to discriminate against them or to try to hurt them. So theory of mind is important for language development, for social language development, and language in general. And it is among the core areas that are impaired in, again, autism. And people especially, even if they are higher functioning, they have difficulty with theory of mind. But what is good about this is that people who have higher functioning skills in autism, that you can develop better resources to teach them how to build theory of mind, because you can build stories, for example, called false belief stories, and you can make them sophisticated, and then you can kind of keep working with them and they will be able to comprehend because the language is good. But if someone is, say, nonverbal, or the language level, IQ level is very low, the social story part is not going to be as effective. Now, let's look at language. How we have studied language, how we have viewed language over decades, over, millennia. There are views of Skinner's and Chomsky, and this is taught in psychology and linguistics and communication disorders, for example. When we look at language and knowing that everything that we have, that we know, that we can do, and everything is based in the brain. When I look back at how someone like Skinner, for example, thought about language, and other people who thought about language initially, looking almost, at the brain, seeing it as like a watermelon, that you just, you have the watermelon and you don't know what it looks like inside, and you kind of guess. You look around it from outside. Oh, it might have seeds. No, it might have this. It might be really bright red. It might be pink. It might be white inside. And everyone would use whatever evidence they have from the outside and come up with a theory, an idea. Now, with neuroimaging and how sophisticated the brain studies and the brain research is, they have cut the watermelon up. I mean, they have split it. We are able not just to see inside, we are able to slice it and see like the molecules inside of that watermelon. How everything is. So a lot of these theories and hypotheses and things that unfortunately they continue to be taught and to be studied in textbooks and so on, we have to re-examine these. Many of these things do not have validity today. Language, as Skinner saw it, as a rewards and punishments and this and that, and a whole theory about language, how it is acquired and so on, that is just not holding anymore. I mean, we need to move on. Then Chomsky came and looked at language, and as accredited with giving us the idea of syntax, how you study sentence structures and so on, and looking at morphology and the different components of language, semantic, and looking at language as building from little letters, little sounds, and you build to bigger and bigger and bigger structures, and you have this huge, construction, like a house. But he spoke about something called the language learning device, saying that in the brain there is some kind of system in the brain that is preloaded with grammar and language universals before the baby is born, and so on. And of course, there is nothing like that. The idea that when we want to understand language, how we communicate, how we acquire language, we need to look at modern research that focuses on the brain, on neuroscience. And the first serious studies that came about were in the 1800s, like 1886 or so, when Broca here discovered an area in the left side of the brain that is specialized in the processing of grammar. And basically what we know today is how you learn grammar. It is you have a pattern, and then you fill it in with different materials, different words, and you empty and you use the pattern again to make another. It's like you have a muffins tray to make muffins. So that tray, you use the same thing. Every time you want to make muffins, you fill it with dough and put it in the oven, make your muffins, dump the muffins out, and now you have your mold. Every time you make muffins, they will come the same size, they will come in the same sequence that you have. So the grammatical forms are basically molds, like these, areas in the, that tray, that, where you put these muffins in. And every kind of sentence has its own mold. Like when you say the girl ate the cookie. So you have now a subject, you have a verb, and you have an object. And the subject is a noun with the word the, and then the object is a noun with the word the, and then a verb in the middle. This is a kind of sentence. You can hold the same and just fill it with different words. Say, instead of the girl, a boy. The same, but the same sequence and the same window, but it is different words. The, instead of the girl, say a boy. And then instead of ate the cookie, maybe bought, and then the book. So I changed the wording, but I kept the mold. And the mold is the structure of the sentence. It is the grammar. And that mold, when you hear it over and over, the girl ate the cookie, the boy walked, the boy climbed that tree, that rhythm, the is translated into firing patterns in the brain, and these firing patterns become over and over. When you hear them, they become consolidated so that they serve as a rule. So when you hear the sentence, you identify that pattern, and moreover, you use that same mold, the same pattern, to express yourself in that pattern. You can make sentences just like what you have internalized here. And the area does that, it is called today, after this man, it is called Broca's area. Of course, he studied patients that had strokes, and the patients who had, died, they had, wounds in this area, and they weren't able to speak grammatically. So that gave rise to the serious study of cognition, of language, of brain from inside. Then Carl Wernicke came, and he was 27 years old, or 20, I think 27, and he discovered another area that is also known as Wernicke's area. So that area is about here, also on the left side of the brain. And he said this area is dedicated to language comprehension. And yes, indeed, today we know it helps you recognize speech and to connect sounds into words, and it works with other areas to connect meaning in the concept with the sounds. And moreover, Wernicke discovered that there is a pathway to go from that Wernicke's area to Broca's area. By doing so, you connect hearing and processing and comprehension with speaking and articulating and so on. So, but this gave rise to like the real, gradually, to what the understanding that we have about language, how people communicate and so on. So now let's look at the components of language, the elements of language that you would normally study in linguistics. But I'll give you a brief kind of overview. Languages all over the world, any language, is made out of 5 systems. One is the system of phonemes, or sounds that we hear, and that is called phonology. So phonology, the sounds of the language, you don't focus on spelling here, you focus on the sounds of the language. You combine them together in a certain way, according to certain rules, and you make syllables and you make words. So phonemes are the building blocks of a language. You combine the phonemes, together to make a set of linguistic meaning. In other words, to make one word that gives you a meaning, a concept. You call that concept a morpheme. Morpheme. So the word cat, hippopotamus, each one is a morpheme. Computer is a morpheme. Once you add meaning to that in any shape or form, you have more than one morpheme. So, for example, the word cat is one morpheme. It means it is one unit of linguistic meaning. If you say cats, how many morphemes are there? It is 2. How? Because S is a morpheme. When you add it to cat, it gives you meaning. Instead of saying cat, you are saying more cats. So that gives you additional meaning. So any component of meaning you add is going to give you. So if you say history, history is a morpheme. It's a concept, one meaning. And you say prehistory. Pre means another concept. You know, what happened before people started documenting history. So words can build up and have more and more morphemes. When you say prehistorical, and that is 3 morphemes. So anyways, syntax is the aspect of combining words together into phrases and having phrases to combine into sentences, and use particular tools. Like you said, in this position you put nouns, in this position you put verbs, in that position you put this and this and that. So it deals with the grammars, grammars of the languages. It deals with how the different patterns of sentences are organized and made. Semantics, it has to do with the meaning generally, the aspect of meaning, of morphemes, the aspect of meaning within a sentence, within the boundaries of the sentence. Pragmatics has to do with goals, social communication goals. It means you are using language. Why are you using language? For what purpose? In order to speak, you must have a purpose. You must know what you want to express. Who are you expressing it for? Who are you formulating the message for? What do you want to get with that message? And so on. So pragmatics is about using language in context to achieve means, purposes, goals. And there are 2 sides of it. Social communication, like verbal, or it could be written, like email. I want to achieve a purpose. I want, for example, to reserve a room. I am going to use email and say to my to the admin system, please book a room for this and this. And now I send the message. So that, and the way that I use it, for example, saying, please, hi, so and so, and then thank you. All of these are social things. We can express them in writing or verbally. But when you only deal with written text, written text from a perspective of how it is connected, how it is established, organized, and so on, you look at textual pragmatics. You look at discourse. So, and you analyze it and get meaning out of it and so on. So, but when you say social communication is using language for social communication purposes to achieve social communication goals. But in discourse, you could take a textbook, you could take a short story, you can take a speech given by a president, for example, and analyze it and find out how, the meaning hidden in it and the meaning it makes and so on. That is part of pragmatics. But we call it discourse pragmatics or textual. And the other part of pragmatics is social communication. And we focus a lot on social communication within the context of teaching, learning, children, intervention, and so on. Language universals are also attributed, of course, to Chomsky who spent a lot of time, many years, finding out what is common among all the different languages, and the fact that every single language has these elements that we study today and we teach today. That is a lot of the effort came due to Chomsky. Language universals, examples in development, for example, all children all around the world are expected to say the first word by between ages 11 months and 14 on average. On average, by the time the baby has his or her first birthday, that baby should be able to say the first word. By around between 18 months and 2 years, the baby should be able to combine 2 to 3 words together to make a basic structure of a sentence. That is also all over the world. By about end of high school, a person should have about 60,000 words in their vocabulary. This is research that could be I think could be outdated, because it goes back to about 2000, maybe 15 or 16, and with the internet and all of the explosion of social media and so on, I do believe you expect more words. But just as an idea, that for example, that as you go through development, you are going to develop similar skills to different people around the world, and that is part of language universals. We know, as we spoke extensively before, about the sensitive or critical periods in development, in terms of language, in terms of sounds, phonemes, the acquisition of prosodic features. That is a very early part of language development. And language, especially the verbal part of language, is established based on prosodic features. What is prosody? Prosody is the natural rhythm, the natural melody of language. How you say, when you say a question, how you just raise your pitch at the end. Did you really do that? When you make a sentence, you drop pitch at the end. So you use you raise your pitch, lower your pitch, raise your voice, lower your voice, and as you speak, you make waves and waves, and language is melodic, is prosodic, so that as we speak, we pause at certain places, we raise and lower our pitches, we kind of stress certain elements, and again, we intone, we kind of modulate, going up and down, and creating melody with our language. That is the basic foundation, and that begins in the womb. Around the baby spends the last 4 months of pregnancy, second half of pregnancy almost, learning prosodic features from the mother's speech as she continues to talk. And these are, again, when you hear that rhythm, the neurons are firing and kind of memorizing these patterns. And then the baby continues hearing that rhythm of the language after being born, and they keep strengthening the patterns that they have of that language, the cadence, the melody of that language. And that serves as the first foundation of language acquisition. So by the 7th month, the baby has acquired the system or the repertoire of sounds in his or her native language. And then between 7 months and 11 months, there's a window in time where if you give the child sounds from other languages and ask them to distinguish, for example, have a Japanese or a Chinese child hear l and when their native language doesn't have a difference. But if you have them hear these two sounds, they will see them as two separate sounds. Whereas an adult cannot do that. They will just see both of them as one single sound. So the babies, I mean, at that time, then they start by ages 11 months or 12, they start now to be dedicated solely to their native language, and their networks will be kind of dedicated, and they would not pay attention now to a second language. If it comes casually, it becomes a distraction. It doesn't mean that babies cannot learn up to 5 or 7 languages simultaneously. It means we are speaking about the normal process, in normal situations. But if you have a baby, coming and age 1 year or so, yes, they can. However, if they miss the previous year, they do not have a chance to develop one native language. They will not be able, and they will have difficulty acquiring a second language. And this is one of the universal things about language, because all of them have a hierarchy. All of these languages have a system system of rules, and all of them are organized in a similar way. So if someone has difficulty, if they do not have the opportunity to develop a native language system, that is going to make it hard for them to develop a second language, because they wouldn't have the foundation. It doesn't mean they will not do that ever. It means in order to develop their skills, you have to focus just on building one language you can consider as the native language, and then you can build from there. It will take more time than the normal process of language acquisition, but children can achieve that early in life. Language itself, in terms of content, in terms of grammar, in terms of mastering the rules and writing it, an adult can do that. There's basically no limit. However, learning how to speak a language without an accent, there is a critical period for it. And usually it's about age 15, or in other words, puberty. And if someone comes, say, is going to immigrate, goes to another country, and where he or she will speak with the natives and live in that country for a while, if it's before 15 years of age, they will be able to speak that language with a native accent. They would not have a foreign accent. If they come after age 15 or 16, after their physical maturation is completed, then most likely they will have an accent, even though they can speak language fluently and so on, but they will have a distinctive accent that could stay with them throughout their lives. They will have a better chance to develop to have either a smaller kind of accent or not very pronounced, if they did not learn the language before coming into the country, because in many cases they learn it from someone else who doesn't know how to speak it, and a lot of the learning is not really good in that case, and then as a result, they have faulty learning that they have to take out, dismantle, and that will obstruct the learning of new skills. So it makes the process a little bit. But if they haven't learned at all from someone who didn't have learning experience with that language from a foreign speaker, that means they will have a better chance when they come to the native country that has that native language, that they will acquire it and have a better chance of speaking it without an accent. I think even if they come after 16 or 17 or around that time, or at least if you have two people, one who learned through foreign speakers and one who did not, the accent of the one who didn't learn from foreign sources will be better than the person who learned and studied the language and had foreign speakers teaching that second language as a second language. The language that mothers naturally use, or that we as adults use with kids, babies, it is distinctive, natural, and even 4-year-old children, when they speak with a baby, they use that kind of high-pitched sound, and they slow, and they speak like, say, in single words, and that is called motherese. Sometimes now they use the term parentese because of gender equality, and you can listen to this video and see how it goes, how it is used. You can see that there are pauses to give the child the turn to process, the baby, and they're high pitch, and it has a pattern. You say 3 things or so, and then you repeat again. You say 3 or 4, and then you keep repeating things over and over. That is a critical part of that stimulates the development of sound patterns and language patterns, and it should be used, of course, as much as possible during early childhood. In terms of language lateralization, there was a period of time where people were kind of evaluated by commercial things, and you are a left side brain, you are a left brain person, a right brain person. These things are nonsense. Now we know they are nonsense, and they were hyped and commercialized. And the idea of the brain having, say, or someone being a right brain person on the side. So again, that is an obsolete thing. The way the brain works, even though it has almost identical sides, and like your hands, this hand, this hand. If you really look, you are going to find some differences. But generally, grossly, you look and say, yeah, they are just mirror images of each other. When we look at the brain, the structure, there are areas that show asymmetry, but roughly they are like right hand, left hand. But it doesn't mean that the same areas in the left side function the same like the same areas in the left side. Like I mentioned, Broca's area, going being here, for example, is only on the left side of the brain. Wernicke's area being on the left side here, it is only on the left side. Broca's area enables us to, number one, to string words together to make sentences, grammar. Number two, to activate the motor, the system, so that motor system can make speech. Enables you to move your lips and your larynx and this and that. So, now look at the right side of Broca, across from Broca's area, on the right side, the area that is shaped just like it. That area enables us to match our tone of voice with what we are saying. Like I am kind of joking, get out of here. So I am making that, raising the pitch and doing this, matching it with my facial expressions, matching it with my words, and making an effect that you are going to understand as joking. Or I could just say, I am working and, for example, or recording and there's something. So I don't do that, but suppose that you are angry at someone, say, get out of here. You are meaning it. That also, that part, on the right side of the brain, that is what enables you to match whatever tone of voice you have with your words, with your facial expressions. Broca's area on the side here enables you to assemble sounds into words, to work with other areas, to match meanings with sounds of the words. The area that is a mirror image of it on the other side, on the right side, enables you to comprehend the tone of voice of someone else's speech. So you can see there is no redundancy. Individual components of the brain, they serve as elementary functions or elementary or core centers for particular functions. However, for these areas to do their work effectively or do their work at all, they have to be the center of a network. So they are here and they have pathways going to this and this and this and this and make a circuit together. If that area falls or stops firing, then the other areas are going to suffer. And there will be some functions, might not be lost completely, but these areas are going to use the information they have to help you carry on. But without this engine, or some of these other areas there, you are not going to be able to have full normal functions. So the areas that are on the left side of the brain are, as you see, connected through the corpus callosum with the right side, and they complement each other. It doesn't mean there's someone who you can say, oh, they are right-sided, left-sided. No. In order for you to say, comprehend the sentence like, it is raining cats and dogs. The left side of the brain is going to give you the sentence, going to give you the words, and then say, oh, and then you expect now, look up and you'll find cats and dogs falling from the sky. This is what the left side of the brain will tell you. But then the right side of the brain takes that and works on it and says, no, that is not what it means. And it tells you what it means. So it is a way to conserve space and a way to reduce redundancy by having, different parts function, serve as elementary centers for particular functions. But these areas, to function well, they have to be the center of a whole network. And when you activate that network, you have normal functions. And disruption of that network by having, some elements down, then that will cause, major dysfunctions. So, but there are, for example, so language fundamentals like sounds, grammar, and so on is in the left side of the brain. Language holistic processing, like you have two sentences together, you have to get the right brain to tell you the connection between these two. If you have anything beyond what the literal meaning of the words and sentences is, you have to go to the right side of the brain. So you complement. And then the right side has to do with holistic things, look at the entire picture, at the whole story, at the whole paragraph, at the whole, thing together, as opposed to individual components, like the left side would have you do. If someone has, so the right hemisphere, for example, is dominant for emotional prosody, a melody of language and getting the tone of your voice and so on, and also to enable you to express yourself in a particular tone. When the left hemisphere gets involved in prosodic processing, then only in particular circumstances that it would do that. But if it does, it is going to give you a false image. It will give you a concrete kind of thing if you do not have input from the right side of the brain. People who have difficulty, who have a stroke or damage in the right hemisphere, they have difficulty, for example, using intonation, using a melody, making a normal melody of speech. Speech could be just flat, monotonous, and they have difficulty interpreting, reading your emotions on your face. They have difficulty understanding what you mean by your tone of voice. You might be saying a joke. They don't take it as a joke, maybe. They will see it as serious, or the opposite. So difficulty processing meaning, again, that depends on the relationship between one sentence and another. For example, if you say, the shoes John wore yesterday, did not match each other. And you say John was very embarrassed at the meeting. To actually connect the meaning of embarrassment or the feeling with the other sentence, you say, what is the relationship? They would have difficulty making that connection. Difficulty producing a coherent narrative. They go from one thing to the other. They might not begin with the beginning. Things are out of sequence and details are missing and very incoherent, very and there's no cohesion to what they say, and difficulty processing and making jokes. These are just examples that right hemisphere damage people exhibit. And the difficulty with jokes is that you have to build up, and come to a punchline and bang. And if you don't get it and you don't time it right, then you lose. You have lost the meaning. So people with right hemisphere damage do not have that. Looking at language, generally, how do we process language? There is very prominent neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, and his wife also, Helen, I think, Damasio. And they have, both of them are neuroscientists, and they have a lab, and they have done a lot of work on language, and they came up with basically summarized all this huge amount of research and their findings, and came up with the model that basically neurologists look at as integrating what we know about language, how the brain processes it. So Damasio and Damasio model looks at language as at the brain, how it makes it mostly, say, in the left hemisphere component, we have the temporal cortex here, and the line that's called the Sylvian fissure that separates the temporal cortex from the parietal and the frontal. And along that line, the areas that surround it, they're all dedicated to language. And the areas that are surrounded, the blue belt areas, these are called like mediational areas. And then the white areas here are the areas for perception and for cognition and so on. So that is the idea, is that there's a language implementation system, these areas here, where you hear signals and process them, and then you process them, and then you assemble sounds, and then you send them to be expressed here. So the language implementation, comprehension, expression, and the areas that serve these areas, expression and comprehension, they are the language implementation. And then the language mediational system is the blue belt areas that actually help connect your language with your thoughts and your knowledge. And the other areas here, they are conceptual, and they store, images of what you things that you know, and sensory information, like how they feel when you touch them, and this and that, and then also categories and different things. So you connect your knowledge, language use, with your conceptual knowledge through that mediational system. That is what that system does. So it consists of these three components. Language development is a non-linear process. It means it is a spiral process. In many cases, there are things that grow in a linear way, but mostly language, you have a layer, and then on top of it, there's another layer, and that serves as a foundation for something else to build on it, and so on. If you don't have the lower level language functions, you will not be able to acquire the higher level ones. So toddler's language, for example, is characterized by single words initially at age between ages 11 months and about 14. And then they start to combine words into multi-word utterances, multi-word combinations when their memory is stronger. So they begin ages 18 months or so, they start to combine two words, and then they build to three, and they start from there. They learn the boundaries between words and the meanings of words. Then as they hear, they know that this word is one unit by itself. As I'm speaking, even though I am continuously speaking, they have the ability in their brain to segment, the words that I make and see them as separate units. Language, receptive language, of course, exceeds expressive. In other words, you have to store concepts here before you are able to actually express. And this is one of the reasons why a child reaches age 9 or 10 or 11 months before they are able to say the first word. Babies start learning nouns first, and then they transition to verbs. Vocabulary develops significantly about age 18 months to 24 months. They have a spurt in their vocabulary, and that spurt of development enables them now to have more words to combine into, make multiple word combinations so that they would start to build sentences. That all happens between, during the first 2 years of life. So language development is consistent as it develops with attention abilities, with memory, and with cognitive development. And it is dependent on these abilities. During preschool, the preschool stage, the major emphasis on language development is on semantics and pragmatics. In other words, the baby is going around picking up words very quickly and learning about, on average, 5 words a day. And of course, that might sound like not too much, but if you day by day, that's a lot. And then pragmatics, social communication. How do they interact? How do they take turns? How do they start speaking? When do they interrupt? When they and so on. So that is a major focus in that preschool period. And then in terms of phonology, their words at the beginning are simple. They usually have like a consonant and vowel, like ma, da, ball will be ba. And then they go from there to vowel consonant, like up, up, vowel consonant. Like they lift their hands up and say up, and then once they go, they build 2 syllables together. They take these and combine them: consonant, vowel, vowel, consonant, or vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. They combine them together like this, like da, da, ma, ma. That's 2 syllables. And semantics, in terms of semantics, again, during the preschool years, they focus a lot on categorizing, and they focus a lot on categorizing. They want to see things in categories. That is like a skill they focus so much on, between ages 1 and 2. And if you give them something like a bunch of, say, straws, they are gonna sort them out. If you give them blue cups, white cups, and so brown cups, and have the straws white, brown, and white and blue, they will take these slightly and just sort them out based on the cup. That's a natural way that the brain learns how to organize things into categories and patterns. When they learn something, I mentioned earlier the example of a horse. So they learn, horse, white horse. And then you show them a few days later a black one. So, they look at it as something else. And then they understand, oh yeah, this also can be called a horse. And you have a brown one. And then they see a donkey. and they say, oh, that is a horse. So that, when they go overboard, now becoming kind of going beyond the category, that's called overgeneralization. They name something that doesn't belong. Oh, looks like a horse to them. They call it, so donkey would become a horse, or maybe a buffalo, or maybe a cow, a horse. And then it takes them like 1 to 2 weeks to kind of get things right, and then kind of fine tune that concept, and then they know, that kind of horse category includes ponies no matter what size, and includes horses no matter what, and then they start to close that category, and they have acquired it. There is a strong correlation, of course, between language and cognition during the first 2 years. Language is dependent on cognition, as the higher cognitive skills that there are, and the more language skills you develop. And we are speaking about a normally developing neurotypical child. So children who have not produced words, who are still at like a basic level, they like to play with objects, toys, nouns. This is gonna teach them nouns. When they start to understand verbs, they start to think action, they start to think play. And this is why when children become verbal and they have words and they play, they learn verbs. Do, go, and then they start to learn verbs through play, and they use more action words and action figures and dolls and things like that can facilitate the learning of words. Cognitive growth always drives early word combinations, because you have to have enough memory, you have to have the ability to store and manipulate language, and you wouldn't do that, be able to combine words, if you do not have memory to sustain that knowledge, so you can assemble words and put them in the right sequence. In order to learn language, to learn a word, you have to have these basic skills to acquire just a single word. You have to understand the meaning of the event as you use the word. Say the event-based means here, there is a context, there's a routine, there's say a bathtub, and you have a ducky. And then the words, is used in the tub. Where is it? I think these are both. And it is used in this particular context, in the experience. So event-based, it is related to a particular event, to a particular context. So the person has to have that knowledge, the routine that they experience. Sequences of events and routines. And the routines provide a context, a social context. The feeding routine has its own language, has its own interactions, lifting up the spoon, bringing it to the baby opening her mouth, and the baby, you might say a word, hum, or any kind of word, and the baby laughs. And so then the bathtub, it's a whole different context that has its own vocabulary, that every time the baby goes to the bathtub, they have the same things, mostly, day by day by day. And these routines, sleeping routine, swing routine, nap time routine, bath routine, story time routine, all of these give context, give a rich context for language schemas, words and sentences and everything with language to develop. And because these are heard day by day, over and over and over, they build, and they are consolidated, and they serve as a scaffold for language to grow on, to develop on. The baby also has to have to learn how to classify, categorize words into words into categories. So for example, new words are categorized and organized for retrieval. Like if you say, oh, vegetables, lettuce, onions, this, that, things that go together, the baby knows that they belong together. Food items versus toy items and so on. So this the event and the routines, and you also have the ability to categorize things, how close they, like all horses, they are in the same category. The ability to understand all, dogs are in one category, and so on. In this stage, in the preschool stage, of course, the baby understands that how they combine single sounds to make words, and also they recognize word boundaries, as I mentioned before. By 11 months they understand when you say something, the dog went out, that is one word, dog is one word, went is one word, out. But they still take some words that we kind of blend together as individual words, like I got you, or what's up. They take that as, for example, as one word. But generally they can recognize the boundaries. The basic principles of word learning include reference, mutual exclusivity, overriding, extendability, and whole word principle. That means these are the instruments that they use in order to acquire words. Reference, they might point to something, and they come to a point when they are 9 months old. They go around and they point to things. They grab toys and give them to you. They hand you things so that you label them. And they might say the word. And then they look at you and they give you the object and say the word, or point and say it and listen to you. You confirm. This is what they want. Before they take it in, they want you to confirm their understanding before. So they might look at a cat, and they say cat, and then they say, yeah, cat. And then they confirm their understanding. If they say look at a dog and call it cat, they look at you and then they say, oh, cat. They repeat for themselves, and then they take the word in. And then, so it's a verification. It's important. If you do not give that verification, then the child could mislearn vocabulary words and grow up with them. Mutual exclusivity, what I mentioned before, was that initially when the image of a white horse, it becomes horse to the child, and nothing else is a horse unless it is white and looks like the one that the baby saw. That's mutual exclusivity. Then you go and say, oh, there's a black horse, and yeah, it is also a horse. You do mutual, you do overriding. So you start to kind of say, oh, yeah, let's restore that file again and make it updated. Black horse, brown horse, a horse can be any color, any size, and so on. And then extendability, extending one, like the example I'm giving, one category, extending it, saying, yeah, all horses can be different sizes, and so on. They're still called horses. Whole object principle, it means one object or one thing is one concept. Like horse, that is one concept, one thing. It has a single word that is connected with it. Anything that you have, stapler, computer, each one stands for one concept. One object equals one concept. 2 years, the baby is interested in games and toys showing cause and effect, and that teaches them a lot of symbolic play, and it is a critical skill, the same skill that you use to do problem solving and to do social communication, and any skill that requires cause and effect, analyzing behavior, and so on. 3 years of age, they focus a lot on thematic role play. Let's play a gas station, and let's play maybe a train station. Let's play police, going to catch criminal. Let's play doctor, and all kinds of themes when they have a context and focus and make and organize a game, based on that. By 4 years of age, a baby is able to role play, to imitate a baby, to imitate being a baby. So it tells you like they have theory of mind by that time, that they are really kind of like little adults in that part. And when they speak to a baby, they dumb down their language and they speak like, the motherese language style that you watch in the video. And language that is used during that, playtime through preschool is very much influenced by the context where you are and by the people that you engage and you communicate with. Say, and up to 3 years of age, the language that a child uses is a reflection of who the baby that child is communicating with. And if the child is communicating with someone, say, parents who do not have a strong vocabulary, that baby's vocabulary will be a reflection of the parents' vocabulary in that preschool part. Of course, unless the baby goes to a preschool, and in that case, you counter that effect. So we end here, and I hope that you found that in this lecture that I explained the milestones of language and cognition, and that more importantly, that I explained how they interconnect and how language serves to as a means to convey, thought and feelings and emotions and so on, and it also serves to be a tool to build cognition as well. And it relies, you have to have cognitive skills to be able to do language. So it really goes hand in hand, and especially beginning from ages 2 years of age, and then a few other years, like maybe probably to 4 or so. So thank you for persisting and listening to the lecture, and I hope you have enjoyed it.